please.
Mike, you went to Celsius to try to get my deal. Called me right after you called them. You never called to check in on me.
Do you know?
You never called to see.
I texted you.
No, you didn't. It was after you went after the deal.
And by the way, I wasn't going after the deal.
You did.
I was going after the contract to bring to Logan and say, beat this with Prime, please. But they're not accurate though. Not reaching out to
lying?
No, I think there's probably
what about the Bobby Lee thing, bro?
What did you want me to do about the Bobby Lee
I don't know, maybe not tell me to shut up after I get
I didn't tell you to shut up. I never said that.
I looked at Logan, I go, Logan, this is gonna make me look really bad. No. And he says, I don't give a what you look like. Bro, come on, dog. You were standing right next to me when he said that. Dog, nobody felt safe in that. You don't even feel safe in that.
Okay.
So like, how are you trying to make it seem like what I'm saying is nonsense?
I'm saying someone who doesn't live the perfect life. I'm saying someone who leads a life of deceit, lies.
Is there an example of the person that you're discussing specifically? Because it almost feels like you're talking about a certain.
So on November 8th of 2022, Bobby Lee appeared on the Impulsive Podcast episode 351, and it turned out to be a huge turning point for the show because a lot of people point towards that episode as the exact moment that Logan's and George Janko's friendship started to fall apart publicly, because even though back then the episode was successful, a lot of people liked it, and a lot of people, including us here, covered George's reaction to getting roasted by Bobby Lee. Now we know that not only were there a lot of things that were cut out from the episode, but also there were a lot of things that were going on behind the scenes between George and Logan Paul, which obviously didn't let us see the full picture. And then about 6 or 7 months later, after the Bobby Lee episode, George officially left the podcast, the Impulsive show, and the way that Logan Paul handled the whole situation was so horrible that it did end up exposing him for being a horrible friend, because the things that he said after George left and the way that he reacted to the whole thing was just horrible.
I love this outlet, and it exists because people watch. And without people watching, I just have a show like
And well, a few weeks ago, Mike Majlak, also known as Mike Majlak on this channel, he was on George Janko's podcast and actually had a very interesting conversation, and they exposed a lot of things which made Logan Paul look even worse, because even though technically he did respond, I mean, he attacked, he went at the easiest claims that he knew he could debunk, but didn't actually address the most important issues, which again, just made him seem like a horrible friend. And so because of that, I was waiting for a more formal or longer response from Logan Paul instead of that TikTok or shorts. And funny enough, on their last episode of Impulsive, they actually had two very interesting guests, and they were talking about religion and God. And at some point, it did seem like he was trying to take shots at George Janko. And we don't know if that was the intention, but that would be an insane way to try and get back at George. And we'll talk about that later. But for now, let's start with George and Mike's conversation.
This is where we probably have to get into the material. Like that was
Bobby Lee situation.
No, hold on. We can talk about those. Okay, I'll listen and said, yeah.
Okay, the Bobby Lee situation.
Who was the first person that jumped off the couch and said, George just left, that was not good, we have to fix this situation?
But did they not cut shit that you should have stood up for me and said, hey, you can't cut that shit. That's going to make him look like an idiot for leaving.
Okay, let's slow down, and I'll answer that. We have always cut. This is all healthy, by the way. We have always cut.
Start crying.
No. Which by the way would be healthy. We have numerous times on the show, which I'm sure a number of shows do, cut things that we believe will protect the integrity or reputation of the guest.
That protected nobody but him.
No, of the guest. That's what I'm trying.
Well, what about the guy that you break bread with, bro?
But we removed a number of things that you said on the podcast.
Name one.
Well, no, I'm not going to.
Booty, bro.
No. Do you want me to? There was something that you said on the laser beam episode.
What laser beam episode?
Do you remember laser beam in Australia when we did that episode? I'd rather not say. I can tell. Why don't I just tell you?
Just tell me. I'll beep it.
You said something about like laughing at a girl getting hit in like a parking lot. You saw like a fight.
Yeah, I just said the joke wrong.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, I didn't sexually harass somebody, man.
I'm not. Listen, I'm not trying to die a one-to-one. I'm just saying
okay, Mike, if this was an episode that was you, and what happened to you, and then the whole world thinks that I walked away because I can't take a joke, that's
well, it parlayed into more stuff happening down the line. Like it just became, at that point, you saw me, I went on Bobby's show.
Yeah.
Right?
And they cut around it. You said that
I have no control over that. I didn't.
I try to make peace with this guy.
I know.
You've seen me.
Yeah.
I've tried to make peace with him behind closed doors. I try to reach out. I try to be cool. But by the way, and I'll just say this, we'll just empty it out.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. Now, the conversation starts about 45 minutes into that episode, and right away, they get into the whole Bobby Lee situation, which I think it's a good start because based on that episode, based on what I saw, I did get the wrong opinion or the wrong idea of George, because even though it is true that he wasn't taking the jokes very well, and he at some point even tried going at Bobby Lee, he took a shot at Bobby Lee and got completely destroyed, which was fair game.
I want to ask George, what did you want to throw something out?
Well, yeah, actually, so I'm very blessed, but I didn't know I was going to be here. So
it's like that's. Are you done? It was just a long monologue.
He was just waiting.
Let me just say something. I loved what you were saying. It was just very long. Yeah,
that's usually me.
Yeah.
That's usually.
But I got what you're saying, and you really inspired me, George. and can I say something?
Comedians suck.
No.
I hate comedians.
No, I want to say something.
Sebastian sucked, left me on red. You suck. First of all, don't touch me.
Yeah.
Do not touch me.
My bad.
Thank you.
All right, but yeah, we just need writers to edit that down. Like if we had a staff of writers, they'd be like, "Yeah, we'll cut that." But
I'm sorry.
Essentially, it was a really good monologue.
Usually, when I do my comedy, I don't have writers in the room. I actually write my own stuff.
Okay, I can tell. Maybe you should get a writer. But my point is,
even though all that happened, he technically was taking all of it, and it wasn't until Logan Paul made that one comment about him being checked out that he stood up and then left the show. And then once I listened to what George said on Howie Mandel's podcast, it really changed my mind, because at that moment, he did seem very vulnerable and honest and grounded, because he wasn't nearly or having nowhere near the same success as he is now. And so because of that, he did say a lot of things that I had never considered in the past, because in my head, George and Logan Paul were best friends and they were very close. And so because of that, I thought that they all knew their boundaries, they respected each other, and they could tell each other anything. But now, knowing that was far from the truth, I definitely don't think that George walking out of that episode was unprofessional at all, especially because now looking back, if you rewatch that episode and closely pay attention, even though they did remove a lot of things, according to George, that would make Bobby Lee look really bad, they did leave some things that I didn't notice at first, but they did leave some things that completely changed the entire narrative. And it does make George Janko innocent, which is wild.
I never had a problem with Bobby Lee.
No, he knows that.
I had a problem with the way that Logan and you were kind of gassing him to keep doing. He started the episode putting his balls in my face. I let that one go. Then every 2 seconds, he kept grabbing my dick.
I don't think...
How would you feel if a man that has his back completely towards you, that only turns around to grab your dick,
right,
talk it to your face, and you can't smack or beat the living brakes off of this guy? Because Logan makes me apologize to this man, or I don't have a job on Impulsive anymore.
I want to apologize for my behavior on your podcast. I feel like I was a little...
Bobby Lee, you shut your mouth. I'm apologizing to you. I left you. You were our guest, and I left you, Bobby.
This is good.
I will forever regret that for the rest of my fucking life. How fucking crazy is that?
I don't think I understood. I can only speak for myself.
Bro, it's not a group chat.
I hope you can understand
it's not a group chat.
No. I'm talking about during the episode, because there was, I didn't know that you were feeling.
But after the episode, do you remember
it.
when you called me? And I said, Mike, this is all that happens. And you said verbatim, you said, it's our fault for not telling you this, but me and Logan are really the ones who should be talking to the guest. You are really there for a boys only episode. So while I get harassed, my other co-host is trying to fire me, and you're trying to leverage me to be quiet during other guests. And then on my birthday, you guys shot 3 episodes, so I couldn't show up.
And now this is when things get pretty crazy and a lot more serious, because we mentioned this in the past when it first happened. And the first time that I saw Bobby Lee doing the whole thing of putting his junk up to George's face, you know, I wasn't a big fan of that. I'm still not. I'm not a big fan of. I'm not a fan of Bobby's nudity and all that stuff. But back then, I just thought about it as a bit, since I had seen him do that same thing with Andrew Schultz and other comics.
Okay. Don't touch me while it's out. Don't touch me while it's out. Just move back a little bit. There it is. I'm gonna look at it. I'm gonna remove my foot and look at it.
Can I see something?
Yeah. Why are you in the power position? Calm down. Okay. I am present.
Ready?
Hold on. I'm gonna remove my foot. Dude, I think you got a little under there too, bro. I ain't gonna lie.
But now looking back, Bobby Lee doing that to comics like Schultz or other comics at the same level as him or higher, you know, I guess it's fair game, because at the very least, comics, you know, comedians like Schultz can, you know, at any time get up, leave the show, blast Bobby Lee for what he did and never talk to him again, and have it not affect his career at all. But when it comes to George, because it is his job, he is the third voice and has to be a more supportive role. You know, it's not as easy as someone like Schultz to make the decision on the spot to, you know, push Bobby away and potentially, you know, harm his stand-up career, because other comics and other people see that he can't joke around that well without seeing what really happened behind the scenes. Now, when it comes to Bobby Lee touching his leg, it's already such a weird thing to have to talk about. But the first few touches, I don't believe it was proof of him being assaulted, especially because Bobby Lee did at some point ask if it was okay for him to touch him there. However, there's two very important details which make Bobby Lee look really, really bad. First of all, George did mention that Bobby Lee at some point did go in for a handful, or at least that's what he made it sound like he was grabbing his stuff, you know, very graphically. If that's the case, that's really, really bad. And obviously, we don't have video of Bobby Lee doing that aggressive grab, which is the complaint that George had, that they took that out of the episode. But I don't think he's lying, because the second detail that I noticed that made me change my mind about this whole situation was that when I rewatched that episode with Bobby Lee on Impulsive, if you skip to the 3 minutes right before George walks out of the episode, Bobby Lee does reach in one last time to touch George Janko. That one last time, it did feel like Bobby Lee went in for a little bit of an aggressive touch, and clearly George wasn't comfortable in that situation, pushed him away. And I didn't notice that the first time, which is wild, because then a few minutes after that, that's when Logan Paul makes that comment about George Janko being completely checked out.
Fuck you, Mike. George.
Why do you keep bringing me up?
I'm tired of this guy's fucking sneaky laughs.
I think he's tired of himself, bro. He gets a little further back every time I look.
He was
George,
supporting,
scoot up.
He was supporting your joke by laughing.
Oh, he was?
And
Oh, my bad. I attacked you for no
tried to
reason.
assault him.
Bobby.
Yeah.
Did you break up with this girl live on the podcast? Because that's good material.
No, but we did address it on the podcast, and we talk about it. And listen, we're best friends. Go back a reel. Now we're doing real.
Yes.
Let's go back to the real. Okay. There are certain.
He is clocked out.
I know.
George has been under a tremendous amount of abuse.
No,
No, stop, George. I want you over here with me. George, I want you over here with me.
And although I don't think Bobby and George could ever be friends after what happened and all the things that were said, now that Mike Majlak knows, now that he knows, there is a chance that he could tell Bobby Lee and explain how George feels. And maybe there is a chance that Bobby Lee didn't know that George felt that way, and then he could reach out privately and then talk it out, or just never talk again. And by the way, just a quick update. I did want to get your guys' opinion on this, because I have a couple of videos that I've been wanting to post to a place like either Patreon or the members only portion of the channel. I wasn't too sure on which one. I thought the members only was a little bit better because eventually we could do live streams and then get benefits from that. And also, this wouldn't affect the content on the main channel, because it would be videos that I have been wanting to make for a while, but couldn't because of, risks of getting demonetized, getting claimed. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you made it this far.
I was always the one that was there. I was
Do you know
always
what
the one
last
standing
straw
up
for
for
me
you.
was? The last straw for me was, Mike, I had to escape. I had to leave for my own fear. When Logan came after me for my religion, the show hit rock bottom and we weren't getting paid. I was getting paid $5,000 a month, and that's covering just Reed. I have a mortgage. I have my sister that works for me. I have Belle. I'm trying to get married. I had all these things. So I had to start my own show because we're not making money on this show, and I'm getting pushed out of this show.
Well, at the time, we weren't making money. You made money on the show.
But at the time, we're a couple months.
How much money did you make over the course
I can show
of
you my books. I was spending 10 G's a month being on the show.
Right.
Name me a job that you're a part of that you spend $10,000 to be part of. Okay, so that's one. Two, and by the way, let's not forget that for a year and a half, I didn't get paid.
No, and I didn't get paid for years.
Okay.
Until I got paid.
Okay, so
right. But you did make a sizable amount of money on the show.
And by the way,
say,
always grateful. I was always grateful.
Something like
for
that?
it. I don't like to talk about money, but I was always grateful. Always grateful. I think anybody could see that. But when I got pushed out, and I'm seeing that I'm getting pushed out, and I start my own show, do you know what my final straw was?
What?
I got my show going, and then not only was I controlled and pushed around on Impulsive, but then Logan's making calls and directing my show. And I'm saying, hey, man, you can't tell me what to do on my own show. That's not okay.
What's that about?
He told me that I couldn't take Celsius. And then I said, hey,
he didn't tell you that you couldn't take Celsius.
Messages.
No, he didn't tell you that you couldn't take Celsius. He
says if I take Celsius, I'm not a part of Impulsive.
Then he told you that if you take Celsius, that you cannot continue to be on Impulsive, which is the core driver for Prime, as you're going to continue to funnel viewership from the Impulsive show back to your show, which promotes a competitive product. Yeah. He also told you that if you wait 6 months after the deal's done, you're more than welcome to rejoin the show if you need to make money.
But they're always trying to find a way to push me out.
And to be honest, when I first saw Logan Paul's response showing all the receipts and all that stuff, I thought it was a slam dunk against George Janko. But then the more that I thought about it and the more that I looked through the response, it started looking really bad for Logan Paul because, for example, the amount of money that George got paid for the 15 months of doing Impulsive, although it is an insane amount of money for just doing a podcast and a podcast that, you know, George didn't start from the beginning, George did become a regular since the 6ix9ine episode, which was, you know, back in late 2020, and then he left around mid 2023. So, you know, Logan Paul showed 15 months of getting paid, but what happened to the rest of the months?
I know he doesn't want to talk money. I know he believes it out, but George made $317,000 in the 15 months that he got paid for on Impulsive. The work requirements consisted of about 3 days a month, 3 hours each day, traveling the world, networking, and meeting some of the coolest people ever. It comes out to about $2,300 per hour, and he also had 10% equity of the entire show.
Not you, not Caleb, not Kevin, not Dylan. Nobody called me when I got fired.
George did not get fired. He quit. I'll touch on that in a second. But after he quit, I quit.
He told me that I couldn't take Celsius.
So this is the big one. Making calls, trying to make it seem like I wanted to control his show is absolutely ridiculous. As you can see right here, I was like, hey, we got to get you Prime because I saw him drinking our competitor, and he told me to call him. He was filming my reaction to tell me he took a deal with a competitor. I told him, please don't film. Like, I'd like to talk about this. I hope you're joking, by the way. The truth is, I thought it was a bad look that my best friend and co-host took a brand deal with our competitor without consulting me, asking me, giving us even a chance to match it before he signed the deal, because the audience that he's building, at least at the time, on his own podcast was being funneled directly from the podcast that I was building with him. I said, hey, dude, I understand you need to make money. The entire text is right here that I sent him after our conversation, because I did understand his position if he needed to make money, but I thought it was also a little odd because he did make $317,000 in 15 months. Regardless, I did tell him I can't have him on Impulsive if he's going to take the deal with the competitor, but if after he makes the money he wants to come back to the podcast, he's more than welcome.
And also the Celsius situation, I did also think that it was a pretty straightforward L for George, because Logan did show a text message in which he reached out and tried to make a deal with George. But then if you pay close attention to the text messages and then, keeping in mind what George said about the whole thing, it doesn't look good for Logan Paul, because again, if you look at the times of the text messages, it does tell a very interesting story. Because according to the text messages, what happened was that George Janko was essentially playing a prank and trolling Logan Paul by telling him by showing him an episode in which he was showing Celsius, the competition for Prime. And so he wanted to see Logan's reaction and record it. And so they got on a call. Logan Paul asked him to not record it, and then they had a serious conversation. Again, if you look at the time of that first message, which was a little bit more playful, And then the second message 5 hours later, which was a well-written, long paragraph, which to me, it seemed like one of those text messages that people send whenever they know they messed up and they said some pretty horrible stuff, and they just want to end the conversation with a nice text message. However, things get even better because based on what Mike and George said, it did sound like back then, George got a crazy good deal from Celsius, so good that even Mike wanted a deal so that he could use it as leverage when negotiating for more money with Logan Paul. And once again, because it was such a good deal, there is a chance that Logan Paul got offended by how much he was asking, and then that's when he probably turned into a more serious and heated conversation. And it really doesn't make any sense to me because if you look at Prime and the amount of money that they spend on athletes and influencers, it's insane. So for Logan Paul to not want to give any money to George, even half of what his Celsius deal was, just because, you know, all the audience could potentially come from Impulsive or whatever, it's insane. And also the whole thing about, you know, George getting his audience or, you know, funneling the audience from Impulsive to his own show, although it could be true to an extent, it, you know, long term, I don't think it really would have mattered that much because, no offense, but I never watched an episode of Impulsive and then thought, oh man, I want to hear more of what George Janko has to say. And it's still like that now. It's not that, and not in a bad way. I'm just not a huge fan of George's podcast, but I respect everything that he has gone through for sure. But the point is that if Logan would have actually sponsored George's podcast, and then George did what he did now, I mean, that would have been a no-brainer for Prime. Which, to be fair, I don't know if the whole podcast with Andrew Tate would have happened if he was sponsored by Prime, but who knows? And once again, even though I'm not the biggest George Janko fan, and not in a bad way, I don't dislike him or the podcast. I do like the episodes with the guests that I'm familiar with, like the ones with Jake Paul, obviously the one with Mike. I saw one with Fluffy and a few others that I'm forgetting, but it is a nice change of pace seeing them on his podcast.
Not like I don't believe it, bro. It's just patterns. So you got to see the patterns. We'll use an example, bro. Like I saw you go through hell over and over and over again. And guess what? It keeps happening. And it's the same thing that they put you through. I'm not going to mention what they put you through, but I watched and I would pull you aside and be like, bro, that's fucked. Like you shouldn't be talked to like that or acted like that. So for you to sit there and be like, oh, I know what you're going through, and then try to make it seem like what I'm saying is a little bit more fabricated, I think that's going to come back at you when the day that you finally snap and you're like, all right, I'm done with this shit. And then you're going to see it for what it is. Because I
already see, that's the thing, I already see it for what it is. So I don't have the same type of reaction to things happening. I don't sit there and think to myself like I'm sitting in some perfect world scenario. This is showbiz, bro. Yeah. It's a
you're right. I'm too emotional.
Place.
I'm very emotional.
No, and by the way, God bless you for it. God bless you for that emotionality and having that emotional intelligence that was called into question. God bless you for it, bro. You have to shed some of that, certainly, to be in that space. Yes, shit gets said to me. Yeah, I feel left out of shit. Certainly I fucking do, and it pisses me off and it makes me frustrated and saddened. Of course it does.
Now, to be honest, because I wasn't the biggest George Janko fan at the beginning, there were some parts of the podcast that it did seem like he was complaining too much or not making too much sense. But then I tried to really put myself in his shoes, and although I haven't experienced something at his level of, you know, friendship or money, I did have a business relationship that could have been seen as a friendship that ended overnight, and it wasn't the easiest decision. But once it happened, it made me realize a lot of things that, you know, while I was in the business relationship, I, you know, made a lot of excuses for it or didn't really want to act on it because I was comfortable. And also there is that fear of change and the unknown. So it's not as simple as, you know, if you don't like it, then just leave. Although some people do have that ability, Theo Von, but others don't. And more specifically, George Janko, he did say in the past that he was emotional. So with that in mind, if you once again look at Logan Paul's answer, it completely confirms how bad of a friend he is. Because if you're Logan Paul and your ex-best friend is telling everyone and your other best friend how he felt about your friendship with him and how he wasn't happy and he was emotionally damaged, and your answer is to fact check him, I mean, what are we doing? Because that would be like if your best friend was telling you how bad of a friend you were, how you were mentally destroying him, and how you missed 4 of his birthdays, and then you respond by saying, whoa, 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 it was only 3 birthdays, buddy. I mean, sure, you know, he was wrong, but it wasn't the best answer. He didn't address any of the other accusations, and when it comes to the Bobby Lee thing, he just said that he should have done better, but again, didn't really speak much on it. And now we finally get to the most recent episode of Impulsive, which was uploaded recently. And although most fans, or majority of the fans, really liked that episode, and it almost seemed like they think that Logan Paul is changing once again, which is, you know, he's great at doing that, or at creating that perspective. The question that most people have is if he actually wanted to have that conversation and was honest about it, or if he used that episode to take shots at George Janko here and there without having to say his name.
But I mean, there's people even just right now parading around on social media, being like bad actors, just not good humans, deceitful, lying, and then they're using Jesus or their beliefs as a crutch to fall back on, and they go from bad to good instantaneously, and people buy it.
Yep.
Where does that person sit in your mind?
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying someone who doesn't live the perfect life. I'm saying someone who leads a life of deceit, lies.
Is there an example of the person that you're discussing specifically? Because it almost feels like you're talking about a certain person.
No. There was when I was talking about someone parading around on social media, but like to me, that like, dude, I don't know if there's like a worse type of person who's using God as like a shield to put merit to their bad actions. That's horrible.
Right on. Does that turn you off though to the real God?
Me personally?
Yeah.
No.
Because a lot of people, it happens. Like thousands.
Actually, you know what? If I'm being not like turn off isn't the right word.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes me doubt, and I don't think that's like
the
unusual.
Doubt the person or doubt God?
It makes me. It just. I don't know. I mean, definitely doubt the person. Not doubt God, because again, I believe in God. That belief's not going away. It's just like, okay, this is a bad human being.
And once again, that episode did get a lot of positive feedback, and Logan Paul did seem interested and honest about the conversation, but obviously that's what he's really good at. That's what he's great at. However, when it comes to Mike, at some point of the conversation, when it seemed like they were talking about George, Mike got extremely nervous and uncomfortable to the point that he actually asked Logan if he wanted to mention someone or if he was just talking in general, because it did seem like Logan was straight up talking directly at George or about George, which is insane. Because keep in mind that back then, when they were still friends, Logan Paul actually questioned whether religion was working out for his best friend, George Janko. And now that they're no longer friends, if Logan Paul was actually talking about George on that episode, he's pretty much saying that George isn't really about religion and instead is using that to, gain more followers and boost his social media presence, which, it's a pretty strong accusation. And I know that George did say that he didn't want to go to war and have a back and forth, but I wonder if he will respond to that weird episode that Logan Paul uploaded. Or I could be wrong, and maybe Logan Paul is actually changing, and he might find peace after that episode and then eventually talk to George on his own show and apologize and become friends again. Who knows? But this whole thing is pretty wild. Again, the Bobby Lee situation, if it did go down exactly how George explained it, I feel like, Bobby Lee should definitely reach out and try to apologize or work something out. And when it comes to Logan Paul, although, again, George doesn't want war at this point, I think the perfect response would be to invite someone like CoffeeZilla to the podcast, or have someone that's a financial expert or someone that can actually explain, something like a crypto scam to George's audience. I think that would be an interesting move. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. Leave a like and subscribe to support the channel. dislike if you didn't like the video. But that is all we have for today. See ya.